So besides the trad thoughts, the other people who are always going on about this man up stuff are the conservatives. And basically, conservatives kind of propose traditional family values, but there are only definite roles and responsibilities for men, definite enforceable roles and responsibilities for men, according to conservatives. You know, they've now so internalized first and second wave feminism that there are no definite or enforceable roles or expectations or norms for women. It's entirely up to her own choosing. So, you know, no matter how headstrong or unpleasant or promiscuous or careerist or whatever, the woman, you know, men are supposed to man up and fulfill traditionally masculine roles and responsibilities according to conservatives. But, you know, there's no equivalent woman up. There's no equivalent expectation or demand that women fulfill traditionally feminine roles or responsibilities or expectations. And sometimes this is more or less explicit. You know, like there was a video I saw recently with Ben Shapiro being interviewed by Ty Lopez, and he was going on about all the great things in the 1950s. You know, the economic growth, the sense of unity and national unity and purpose, and saying, but oh no, we don't want the bad things. We don't want the racism or the sexism or the women not in the workplace. You know, we have to take the best of each time period and combine them. You know, like totally ignoring the connection between those things or the causality that leads to those things. So this is kind of like a half-assed feminism or a halfway house feminism, where they still recognize, you know, traditionally masculine roles and responsibilities as enforceable, but there's no corresponding recognition for traditionally feminine roles or responsibilities. Right? It's totally up to the woman's own choosing. And I already explained in my last video how retarded that is, because people's individual rational choices lead exactly where we are now. And so you need norms and institutions to balance conflicting interests in ways that lead to a collectively optimal outcome, which is what we don't have now. So if you just leave it up to everybody's choice, you know, they're not going to do what's collectively rational. They're going to do what's individually rational. And what's individually rational is for women to follow their incentives into the workforce, either because when they're not in the workforce it's very enticing, or when they are in the workforce, you know, nobody's making much money, and so it seems necessary to have two incomes. And that's where we are. So the only way to prevent that is to prevent it by having enforceable roles and responsibilities and norms and expectations. And you know, that's just all there is to it. You know, and if the conservatives even adhere at this point to traditional norms and expectations, you know, some of them propose them, but in the case of the women, they're not to be enforceable. It's entirely up to her own choice, and definitely she shouldn't be deprived of the vote. But, you know, no matter how promiscuous or tatted up or careerist or headstrong or unpleasant, you know, it's still the responsibility of men to man up and fulfill these traditionally masculine roles and duties and obligations and expectations. And obviously this is a breakdown of reciprocity, right? You can't have something that's enforceable one way but not the other. And conservatives do some other unproductive stuff when it comes to this, like, you know, the worship of female Mary Sue action movie heroes. Alright, this is a totally ridiculous trope, entertainment cultural trope of the ass-kicking female Mary Sue in action movies. And it's totally bogus, because, you know, women have much less upper body strength and even less lower body strength and less aggression, and they're more risk averse and less risk tolerant than men. So this is not a real thing. You know, just like shield maidens are not a real thing historically. And, you know, the Marine Corps has recently opened up all of its job specialties to women, and yet in the entire Marine Corps, only 92 women have qualified for, you know, combat positions in the Marine Corps. So, I mean, this is nonsense, and they're probably not the best or anywhere near the best individuals in those positions in most cases. And, you know, you see the gun-toting, flag-draped bikini babes, which is not only like a total departure from traditional notions of modesty and feminine virtue, but you know, adds the Mary Sue aspect as well. And I get the appeal, right? There's a visual appeal there, which is understandable. And badassity is cool, so that has its own appeal. So why not combine the visual appeal and the badassity, right? I understand it, but it's not anything like a sensible feminine ideal. And I'm not saying, you know, women shouldn't have guns or take defense seriously. I'm just saying that as a practical matter, most of them won't demonstrate the willingness or the ability to a very high degree. And that mainly has to do with their risk aversion and security seeking. Okay, in most cases where a woman is confronted with, you know, criminal violence, say, of whatever sort, she's probably more likely to come out of it intact by just complying with whatever criminal demands are made of her, in most cases. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I encourage women to take defense seriously and have weapons. But it's worth recognizing that a majority of them probably won't, for, you know, reasons of risk aversion, that whatever social benefits may come from that, they come at an individual cost that's going to be higher than most women demonstrate the willingness to bear. And that's fine, too, because, you know, for a lot of reasons it makes more sense to have men in that protector role. So, I'm not saying women shouldn't have guns or take defense seriously. I'm just saying it's an unreasonable expectation. And it's not part of the feminine ideal, because the protector role is part of the masculine ideal. So, conservatives are very confused on a lot of points. They've totally internalized first and second wave feminism to the point where, you know, women having the vote is almost unquestionable. And, you know, sexual liberation is a traditional family value, and, you know, women in the workplace, again, is something that at this point is now beyond question in the normal conservative mind. You know, even with all of its horrible consequences, both economic and social and cultural and everything. So, you know, with all that being said, conservatives are not terrible people. They have a status quo bias, and that's terrible right now because the status quo is terrible. There's nothing about it worth conserving. And conservatives aren't able to conserve anything anyway because they're pretty susceptible to techniques of incremental culture war, gradual culture war, gradual erosion and subversion of the norms that they favor. They're just, conservatives have fairly long-term concerns, but very short-term preoccupations and patterns of thinking. So that they have trouble putting all this in context or putting all this in perspective and formulating a long-term strategy for you know, countering something like that, because they're basically just, you know, people who have a status quo bias, and under normal circumstances, you know, that might be fine, but it's not going to be fine until we supply them with a status quo worth conserving. And that's a fundamentally reactionary project, because there is a lot of stuff that needs to be rolled back before we're going to have a status quo worth conserving again. And even once we do, there's going to be a need for some people who understand, the deeper significance of that and the deeper rationale for that, rather than just having a reflexive status quo bias, because it's easy to hack that and to overcome it in the ways that we've witnessed. Leftists are great at incrementally pushing reform, and once they've accomplished a reform, then conservatives fairly quickly adopt it as something that they defend, just like they've adopted first and second wave feminism. They may still, weakly resist third wave and on, but, first and second wave have at this point been uncritically adopted by conservatives into sort of like a halfway house feminism of their own, where there are definite and enforceable roles and obligations and responsibilities for men. They're going to insist that men man up, but there are no corresponding roles and obligations and expectations and norms for women, right? Because those were abolished by first and second wave feminism, which conservatives have now totally internalized. So this whole man up meme is, it's not something unique to shield maidens or to thoughts. It's also pretty common for conservatives, and it's something that needs to be attacked, and it's something that needs to be overturned if conservatives are ever going to be given a status quo worth defending.